Hello and welcome to another episode of Taking Control of Cancer, the podcast brought to you by the North East London Cancer Alliance. I'm Steve Bland, and in each episode of this podcast, we try and give you really practical advice that you can take on board and take control of cancer, whatever your relationship is with cancer. And this episode is no different. Let's get into it. Okay, so for this episode, we're talking about breaking barriers to breast screening, and I'm joined by Caroline Cook and Riyad Karim. Now, Riyad, I'm going to introduce you properly in a moment. Caroline, though, you are Programme Lead for Early Diagnosis here at the North East London Cancer Alliance. And I want you to just give me a bit of a picture about the screening picture here in North East London, and also what your role is in early diagnosis, because we talk about early diagnosis in every single podcast with every cancer type we talk about, the importance of early diagnosis. What's your role kind of broadly, and also when it comes to breast screening?
Okay, so basically I cover for early diagnosis, raising awareness of signs and symptoms of cancer, trying to improve uptake of all the cancer screening services. My role also includes targeted lung health checks and some of the surveillance pathways, but also primary care, so that's picking people up. So the primary care pathways, people are being referred in from the GPs into primary care. So trying to make that earlier, so that fits in with the awareness really. Around breast screening or screening in general, it is mostly around trying to find ways to encourage people to come in to take up their screening when they're invited, and to just increase screening rates really across North East London.
I mean, this is a big question, but how do we, as a not even just as an alliance, as a population, how do we get more people to attend their screening appointments?
So, well, we do it personally through a lot of campaigns, things like that, to try and like make people aware that it's there and they should go, encourage them to go if they are invited, because obviously it's not everyone's invited at the same time. But I think it's really important. It's such an easy thing to do, if you like, because it's all there. It's all ready to pick people up earlier, and I just think it's just such an easy way for people to go in. But I think there's quite a lot of work that we do that we can go into in a bit more depth about breaking down barriers to screening. Why don't people go? Different communities, different, not just ethnicities either. People from different demographic backgrounds, in socio-demographic backgrounds, I should say, or people from different genders, different sexualities as well. So there's quite a lot there.
Let's talk very basically. What is breast screening? What does it involve for someone going to an appointment?
So women between the ages of 50 and 70 are automatically called by the breast screening service, and then they'll be invited in to come in for their appointment. So they'll always see a female mammographer. So a mammographer a mammogram is like a scan of the breast.
Yeah.
So they'll go into the room. You can invite someone to go along with you, but usually they don't like that a relative or friend in the room because of obviously it's an X-ray, they just. It sounds awful, but they kind of squish your breasts between two plates and then take that scan of the breasts, and they can see from that if there's any changes before anything happens, before we see, before the lumps start, or any changes in the breast tissue that are visible. So it's from personal experience, it's quite uncomfortable, but it's not painful. It shouldn't be painful.
Uncomfortable, but
and quick.
You're being screened for cancer, aren't you? Which you said not everybody qualifies for screening across different cancer types. So I always feel that if you do qualify to be screened for whatever it might be, your bowel cancer, whatever it is, you're incredibly lucky, aren't you? There's not that many people actually qualify for full-on screening programs.
Absolutely, and things like with bowel cancer screening, that's recently over the last few years, the age has come down for that. It used to be age 60s and over, but now it's come down over a period of the last 4 years down to screen people from the age of 50 upwards. So, and that's a massive difference.
This might seem like an obvious question, but let's answer it anyway. Why is early diagnosis, and why are these screening programmes so important?
So the most important thing about early diagnosis really is to, and it sounds obvious, pick people up at an earlier stage, so stage 1 or 2 cancer, stage 1 if possible. And the reason being, the treatments at that stage are less toxic, less invasive, and the outcomes generally are better. So you're going to be treated a lot easier and probably have a much better quality of life, and then live a longer life. You're more likely to have curative treatment than like palliative treatment at an early stage. And the thing about screening programs is they'll pick things up before you even notice any symptoms. So breast screening, like before you see a lump or a change in the nipple or the breast tissue, breast skin. Cervical screening before you get any sort of unusual bleeding, and bowel, you might not notice the blood in your poo, but bowel screening picks that up.
What's the uptake like in this part of London, and also how does that, do we know how that compares to a more national picture?
We're not great in the national picture. I think it's about 64%.
Right.
Whereas the target is 80%. We're not the worst. We're probably sort of like between the different cancer alliances in London, I think or between the different ICB areas, I say we're probably smack in the middle.
Yeah.
And there's not a huge amount in it. Most are under 70%. I think it's probably outside of the more sort of urban areas, uptake is better. We find as well that it's not just that we're 64% across the board, but there's a real difference between boroughs and within boroughs as well, depending on the area that you go to. So, for example, in Tower Hamlets, City and Hackney, uptake's about 46-47%,
right.
Whereas if you go to Havering, it's more like 74%.
So let's take before we bring Riyad in, let's take one of the areas you mentioned, under 50%.
Mm-hmm.
Made my eyebrows raise a little bit. That seems quite extraordinarily low. So what's going on there? Do we know why people aren't taking their appointments?
Well, that's what we try to find out. We said we've been going out and we'll do some really targeted work with people, try and understand what's stopping them from going in the first place, and why they're not going for their screening. And then what is making people go in other ways, so we can learn from different areas. So, I mean, just sort of, it's probably worth noting that in Redbridge, they've seen like an 18% increase in the last year, and we'll put that down to the fact that they've done so much awareness work. But also, there's a mobile screening van right in the middle of the Redbridge town centre. It just makes it so much easier. A lot of it is around access. I think there's reasons like, for example, people are... it's not a priority for a lot of people. If you've, the cost of living, etc., if you can't afford to get to your appointment, or you've got a young family to care for, or like grandchildren, whatever, or elderly relatives, people don't put themselves first quite a lot of the time. And if you feel well, you don't feel there's anything wrong, you think, well, is it worth it? Do I need to go?
We've talked in previous episodes about the enormous cultural diversity in this part of London. It's so many different languages, so many communities. What sort of challenge does that pose when it comes to education around the actual existence of the screening programmes?
Yeah, so there's a lot. I mean, a lot of it is down to language, but it's also the fact that with sometimes people speak a language, but they can't read it. So there's so many different ways that we have to get information out there. So it's not just in a leaflet or a poster isn't enough. There needs to be videos. We need to be speaking to people. So we try and do as much of that as possible.
We can bring Riyad in now. Riyad, you are the co-chair of the London Bangladeshi Health Partnership Board. And you guys have been working with the Alliance, haven't you, to tackle some of the challenges that community particularly faces?
Yes, that's right. One of my kind of voluntary roles is the co-chair of London Bangladeshi Health Partnership. I've got an NHS day job as well, looking at community engagement and vaccine and screening equity. So in both of these worlds, this is really important. So there's some real challenges. Obviously, we're dealing with underserved communities, and it's not necessarily that they're hard to reach. We, as a place, system, region, haven't collaborated enough to reach them. And so it's a really good position now that many of the organisations that have come together and individuals across London to form the London Bangladeshi Health Partnership, which is a collection of public health, NHS, people working in the community organisations, literally after the pandemic, came together wanting to form a strategic group that would look at the health inequalities facing Bangladeshis in particular. We noticed during COVID there was a disproportionate impact on Bangladeshis as there were for other minority ethnic groups, and that kind of gave us the the ingredients to collaborate and do something. And then we met the NHS. The NHS funded us to deliver a summit, which was London's first ever Bangladeshi Health Inequalities Summit for 322,000 people with significant health inequalities. And at that summit, it was important to discuss not just vaccine disparities, but look at cancer disparities and look at pregnancy and diabetes disparities, to look at many of the areas of the inequalities facing Bangladeshi communities. And that's why it was an absolute pleasure to work with Paul and Caroline with the Cancer Alliance to both collaborate on kind of find out what's happening with the Bangladeshi community. Is the current offer working? What are the kind of attitudes, the experiences, the outcomes? Inequalities is not just about, inequalities per se. It's about the experience, access, and outcomes. So to do that, you need to have that connection with the community. And that's what the London Bangladeshi Health Partnership, thanks to NHS funding, is able to do. It's able to kind of reach into the communities, but at the same time understand the system and the NHS and the local authority determination in this space. It kind of brings us together. And in that summit, we came together, we collaborated with the North East London Cancer Alliance in a way to better understand our Bangladeshi community. And with those inputs, we can create more better co-produced outputs.
So when you looked at the Bangladeshi community and you explored why they were or weren't attending their appointments, their screening appointments, what did you find?
Yeah, so London Bangladeshi Health Partnership has a delivery organisation, which is Bangla Housing. And so Bangla Housing performed a workshop with Bangladeshi women to discuss these, kind of issues facing them in terms of appointments. And there were things like kind of navigation around the health service, just the basic things about how to book appointments. But there's also some other specific cultural needs and aspirations. For example, many had assumed that they wouldn't get a female mammographer, whereas Caroline has just already stressed that is actually there, that provision is there to fit cultural needs. But from the community point of view, they weren't fully reassured about that. There are other things that came up, not just about the appointments, but about how they feel about cancer. And I think that is the thing that is really quite specific. And community by community, particular communities have different attitudes towards cancer and the way they express the fear, but also there is hope.
These attitudes and these cultural differences, some of them go back generations, don't they? The way that these people's grandparents and their grandparents and grandparents have sort of thought about cancer and thought about treatment for cancer and screening. And how do we kind of break that generational issue?
Yeah, there is a generational aspect. There's also, so you've got kind of generation, say, for example, myself, second generation, born in the north, living in London. It's the second generation British Bangladeshis. And then you've got the first generation, say my dad's generation, but also the new incoming first generation from Bangladesh and Europe who are Bangladeshi heritage. So there is that challenge there. And how do you bridge it? But there's also, it's not just a generational challenge in the sense that, if you don't mind, I'll just say something personal in terms of my own family.
Yeah, for sure.
So my father was a GP for 30 years in a pit village, what we used to call a pit village, a mining village in the north of Nottingham. And so my mum was a housewife and looked after the family, and she's first generation coming into the country, and she knows a lot about health. And public health, etc. And however, when she presented for breast cancer, it was stage 3. And that's in spite of Dad being a GP and in spite of my mum being someone quite literate on health and other matters.
Yeah.
So what, beyond just the generational divide, what actually stopped my mum from coming forward? And that's something that myself and my brother, who were both born here, kind of grappled with. We couldn't understand it. And my mum kind of later said, after the treatments had started, that she felt scared and she felt embarrassed. And she had almost kind of a little bit kind of given up, and that she felt that this was kind of meant to be, and it's part of, if God wills, what can I do?
Yeah.
So she was actually suffering in silence. You know, she didn't come forward and tell us about it, and she wasn't able to articulate how she felt. So I think there's something there that even in a professional background,
Yeah.
we've got that. But also at the same time, you know, my sister-in-law, I've lost one sister-in-law in Bangladesh who was an anaesthetist to breast cancer. Another one who's quite young is currently going through cancer therapy. And my wife had, kind of BRCA testing, and everything came out fine. But we almost feel a little bit besieged. Many families feel besieged by cancer. But the key to it is actually finding out information and not necessarily being engulfed in that fear.
So how do you, I mean, if you take yourself out of your family for a second and you were looking at how to get to someone like your mother, you know, how would you communicate with someone like your mother if, like you say, you know, she's married to a GP, you know, she's very literate when it comes to her own health, different health issues, you know, how that kind of illustrates the level of the challenge, doesn't it? Because there'll be other people who won't be married to a GP, you know, won't even have that kind of base knowledge of health. So how do you, first of all, get to people like your mother, but get to people that have even less knowledge?
Yeah, I think my mum is very similar to many Bangladeshi women in the sense that who've come here, they have kind of mixed literacy skills. My wife's background is different, but in terms of my mum, she had to grapple with a lot coming here and bringing up a family and everything. So I think with regards to my mum, I think the key issue was, what can we do? I think really it's about, with particularly the first generation, they're very close to the language. And even for me, bred here, when I hear Bangla or Sylheti, or even a northern accent for that matter, something stirs within me because it's a sense of belonging. So it's more intense with the first generation that come here because, we're literally a heartbeat away on a WhatsApp to Bangladesh, and watching Bangla TV. So I think those things where you've got more TV programs and more audio visual, because as Caroline said, there's mixed ability of, even when you're looking at Bengali, of who can read and write Bengali. But I think the audio bites, the reels, the kind of communication in the Bengali language would have helped her if there were more channels and more discussions. Because even Dad, even though, like I say, he served here, highly literate, but when it comes to watching and disseminating and understanding news, he doesn't watch ITN or BBC or Sky. He has those, but he actually watches the world across the 7 or 8 London-based Bangladeshi channels. So,
yeah. That's so interesting, isn't it, Caroline? Because that kind of illustrates the size of the challenge, doesn't it? Because that's one of the languages or two of the languages of so many that you have in Northeast London, and Riyad's absolutely right. I'm sure that goes across every community where they want to consume their news, they want to be educated, they want to have, they're proud of their community, aren't they? They want that's their language. They want to get information in, even if they can speak English, and that's the challenge, isn't it, for you guys to try and educate and not just educate, but when it comes to your appointments next Tuesday at 5:00, get the information out.
Yeah, and most of what we do, we will translate into the top languages that are spoken in North East London. So I think routinely it's about 15 to 17 different languages, but actually there's over 100 languages spoken in North East London, or dialects, I should say. But it's not just about the language, it's about, I think, as Riyad was saying, it's about the fear as well, that sort of the cultural things, that people not wanting to know they've got cancer because they see it as a life sentence. So why would you go for a screening, for example, to find out that you might have cancer when you feel well, and then to be told that actually you need treatment? It's worrying for people. People don't understand that if you go early, then and are picked up early, that the outcome's probably going to be quite positive generally. And I think the other thing as well about it's not just not just about the language about speaking, but it's about talking about it. People don't like to talk about cancer. It's still quite taboo in a lot of communities. And when we've been doing some work with Eastern European people, they tend to go back to Poland or Romania or whatever for their screening, but also with Turkish Cypriot communities, and they don't like to talk about cancer. Same with the Gypsy Roma traveller population that we're trying to work with. They don't want to talk about it. It's almost as if you say the word, then you're jinxing yourself in that way.
And is that a sort of generational thing? Because I imagine, someone from one of those communities is maybe in their 20s or their teens, they might, tell me if I'm wrong, they might have, slightly more open-minded views, and is this kind of changing over time, do you think?
I think with some screening services, probably with breast you might see, and bowel will see that difference, but with cervical screening we're not really seeing that. We're seeing a lot of young women not taking up the screening, because that starts at 25, so we're not really seeing that, and especially in some of the like Bangladeshi community, I think again there's different myths and misconceptions around cervical screening. So, but yeah, I think it will possibly change over time, because we're also doing some work with schools where we've got a charity that goes in and talks to year 10s and 11s, so they'll talk about screening services and equips those children to go and talk to their parents for one thing, but also prepares them for whether, if they've got any symptoms, if they've got any fears, and things that they can do to prevent, or I didn't say prevent, I say reduce the risk of cancer as well.
So what are the big learnings then, a question for you both, what are the big learnings to take out to other communities, other populations from the Bangladeshi community work that you guys have done?
I'll kind of jump in first. I absolutely agree with Caroline. It's not always about language. It's it's much more multi-layered. Obviously, for mum, it would have been helpful to have that kind of, as well as the kind of Bengali news and music and culture. It could be good to have kind of more Bengali public health messaging, on these kind of channels. But I think what's important with every community that we looked at, particularly because with my kind of remit as Assistant Director of Community Engagement, Vaccine and Screening Equity in London for NHS England, what I've noticed is that there is one size doesn't fit all. So what works for one community may not work for another community. There are some commonalities that exist across, but I suppose what we need to do, and what we're doing currently with Caroline and Paul and others in other kind of segments, is looking at who are the trusted leaders in each of the community? What goes in that recipe, in that ingredients? Is it a faith leader? Is it a woman's leader? Is it a very famous businessman or cricketer or whatever? So what is the trusted leader, and what are the trusted places? So, for example, Northeast Cancer Alliance are already engaging and have engaged mosques, and mosques are very important for many of the Muslim communities: Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Somali, Turkish, Kurdish, etc., Black, African. And then once you get into those communities and you build trust and confidence, then they kind of give you access to their trusted channels, the ones I just talked about, the Channel S TV, the kind of Bangla channels, etc., or Polish channels, but also those preferred internal WhatsApp groups where people communicate with each other. So that's where we see that actually for mum, if she had, so for example, in her kind of mindset, which is similar to many Bangladeshi women and men, is that there's a mix between religion and ethnicity. It's a duality. So people are influenced by ethnic pools and culture and music, song and dance and food. But then there's also that kind of religious worldview, either Muslim or Hindu. So that's where kind of like having bases on each of those intersection points are important. So for her kind of spiritual aspect of being a Muslim is very important. But actually, if we had imams and female Muslim leaders who actually then offered a version of hope and also some theological understanding that actually, these things, from a theological perspective, you may get conditions and things like that, but then you have the medicines are at your disposal to mitigate against that, as cures. And from an Islamic or Jewish or Hindu perspective, there's enough evidence for us to actually substantiate there is a need to kind of take that necessary step. So how can we get the faith leaders on board on messaging? So if, for example, more female faith leaders did that, my mum would have felt more comfortable. If she could have had those conversations that Caroline said, I mean, we're talking about 20 years ago here for my mum, and luckily she's alive and well and in remission. But I did lose an aunt from breast cancer as well. So it's having that language, having that access to trusted leaders, trusted places, having cancer screening awareness in mosques, like the Cancer Alliance is supporting with British Islamic Medical Association and others. They make a difference. But it's one size doesn't fit all. Yeah,
it's understanding there's so many reasons why you might not attend an appointment. It's so multi-layered, like you say. And I was just thinking when you mentioned the word hope, the actual tone of voice of the messaging is really important too, isn't it? Because that speaks to whether it's fear or lack of education. If you go in with a like a scare 'em kind of message, a lot of people will just run a mile from that. Whereas if it's if it's a more hopeful, if it's focused on, like you said, Caroline, the treatment is incredible. If we catch it early, good chance we'll find a cure. The actual tone of voice is really important too, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say so. I think that's what we try and focus on as much as possible. But I would just echo what Riyad was saying about how you can't, one size doesn't fit all. And we have to sort of like react to different communities in different ways. But also, and I always say this, the messenger is as important as the message. You have to trust the person that's talking to you. So it might be an imam, or it might be your sister or a mother or another, just a friend, but it needs to be someone that you trust. Because if I went out and spoke to somebody that I didn't know and was telling them all this health information, they might not really take it in. They might not trust me because they don't know me. But if you're hearing it from someone that, like a loved one, you're more likely to listen to it. And we have found that when we've spoken to some women and they've said, right, I'm going to go away and I'm going to tell my mum about this, or I'm going to talk to my sister about that. And that's about, as I said as well, normalising that conversation and talking about cancer, talking about if they're worried about something, having someone to go to and say, before you go to your GP, even say, I found this lump, what do you think I should do? And I think that's a move in the right direction. I just think opening up that conversation.
Why, Riyad? Why is the who so important in these communities? Why is it, faith leaders you talked about? Why is the who is delivering the message? Why is that really important?
Yeah, I mean, for example, we've looked at Eastern European communities, for example, and we know from our analysis and in conversation with Romanian communities that Romanian doctors are highly trusted. And so they're the ones that we need to work with. And similarly, so what we noticed that if you're from the same ethnic heritage, you understand the lived experience of your community, you'll get better traction. And we saw that in Enfield with Pastor Nick Chanda and the Revival Church, Christian Church of Enfield, where the local council and the NHS both kind of co-sponsored town hall breakfasts where people could come in from Black African, Black Caribbean perspective, cultural heritage, and discuss health on holistic grounds. But we had trusted leaders. So we had obviously the pastor who was really trusted in that community. But at the same time, we had a Nigerian heritage doctor from Medicus Health Partners. We had a local counsellor who's also a pharmacist, Counsellor Adeleke. We had a Ghanaian and Jamaican heritage nurses to talk about diabetes. Just to have that familiarity of setting and people really helps gain proximity to our communities, because for sometimes they don't actually see those people they don't have visibility of them. But when they see that the NHS is representative or the council representative of said community, you feel much more closer to it. And so we've seen that in our vaccination campaigns as well. We see more people of the community being represented in our promotion of vaccines, and similarly the same with cancer. Because London is such a diverse city, it's nonsensical not to do that.
I feel like if we were sitting here in this room 5 years ago, I've been talking about cancer for a long time. My first wife died in 2018, so it's 6 years or so now. I feel like we might be having a similar conversation. We'd have been talking about faith leaders and that kind of thing. Are we making progress in this area?
I think just the partnership that we're with the London Bangladeshi Health Partnership and the onward collaboration. So we started with the summit, and now the North East Cancer Alliance will be continuing working with Bangladeshi Health Partnership. That in itself speaks volumes, because they recognise that you need to have that go-between with the community, someone who understands, an organisation or a partnership that understands the needs of certain communities and invests in them, but then understands what, say, the Cancer Alliance priorities are, is something that is often a gap. And so the fact that the Cancer Alliance is investing and working with us going forwards speaks volumes. Sorry.
No, I agree. I think, and it's not just with your organisation. We're trying to work a lot more with small community organisations, because they're the ones that can get out there to the communities and talk to them. So, for example, we've just started a project, we call it Grassroots, just because we're using grassroots organisations to go out and actually do that awareness talks and talk to people about screening. But they're like Francophone African populations and sex workers, asylum seekers, that kind of thing, because they're people that are already known in their community and trusted. So, and they know how to approach people, how to talk to them, how to sort of really sort of involve them, which we can't do. And it's not that these are hard to reach groups, because they're not. That's a real. I think that's putting the emphasis a bit more on them as being people that are hard to reach, which isn't the case. We just don't know how to reach them sometimes.
That's such an interesting point, isn't it? I've heard that term used so often, hard to reach groups, not just about cultural things, various different communities as being hard to reach. Now, who doesn't want to know about a screening programme?
Yeah.
Or who doesn't want to know how to save your life by early diagnosis? That's the challenge, isn't it? To get out to people who really do want to know, but just want to know in a slightly different way.
Absolutely, and it's not, the onus isn't on them.
Yeah.
It's on us to reach them, not for them to try and reach us. That's why I don't like to say they're hard to reach.
No, that's a good point.
Yeah, so it's on us, but it is difficult for us because we're not necessarily trusted. And you can imagine if you're talking about asylum seekers or sex workers, you don't know what their trauma that they've been through already, to then sort of try and trust somebody that they've never met or had any experience with. So, and actually, it's just making sure that they know it's out there. I mean, screening, for example, it's not mandatory. You don't have to have it. I mean, why wouldn't you? Well, we know there's a lot of reasons why people don't, but it's up to us, I think, to make sure that people understand why it's important and why they should be doing it and what a difference it can make to their lives.
Let's sort of cast a little bit ahead into the future then. What's coming up in the coming months and years? Where might we be in a year's time, 5 years' time with this? Do you think we're slowly going to start edging up towards that 80% that you talked about earlier? Is it going to be slower progress in some communities? What's coming up in terms of the initiatives as well and the programmes?
So we've got quite a few things running at the moment. So the the project that we were sort of alluding to earlier with the focus group that we did with Bangla Housing was around a project called No Time for Cancer, which we're changing the name of. It was originally called No Time for Cancer, and it was just trying to encourage women to go in for their breast screening appointments. But we're going to focus more on asking them to prioritise themselves. So when they get that letter, go to that appointment, and this is why they should go, really. So there's that. There's some work we're doing as well with the younger population, to the younger people, because we found as well in Hackney, for example, the biggest killer of women under 50 was breast cancer. Right. So we've put a bit of emphasis on that, and we're working with Copperfield to develop an awareness project there, and they've done a lot of work with the community youth groups to try and sort of like help work out how we're going to do that, and that should be launching fairly soon. So it's things like that. We've also been doing some work with women with an SMI, because a lot of women that have got serious mental illness don't go in for their screening, and there's lots of things we can do, sort of make, as they call, reasonable adjustments. So it's about identifying those women in their practices and inviting them in if they haven't been for screening in the last 3 years, and then sort of talking to them, saying, what do you need? Do you need an appointment at the end of the day? Do you need a double appointment? Would you like to come in and see the equipment and talk to someone first? And hopefully we should have some feedback on that in the next few months.
That's that flexibility, isn't it? Not the one-size-fits-all approach. That you might have to let someone come and see the equipment first. You might have to work around their schedules for the appointments. That flexibility is so important.
Absolutely, and we're doing something very similar as well with people with a learning disability. It's another group of people that don't come forward and have a screening for many reasons as well, that we need to sort of investigate further. But we're going to be doing some training for the care homes and sort of assisted living homes and things like that, to hopefully help them to help people to come in.
Riyad, you clearly do lots of work in community. Well, your title, community engagement, vaccine screening, equity. This is your bag. But what would you like to see happen? What needs to be changed? What extra support do you need? What kind of shifts the dial here?
I think what Caroline said gives us a lot of flavour of the different ways that we're working as a system, place, region. The fact that the Cancer Alliance is working so many different ways with different people, is just in itself a testament of the changing direction, and that's why it's a pleasure working with people who are thinking innovatively about the needs of our diverse communities. So I really believe that the key cornerstone is, again, that issue of the 3 Ts, we call it, the trusted leaders, the trusted places, the trusted voices, and then bringing that across London in a way that engenders partnership working between cancer alliances, councils, the NHS, the region, and the VCSE sector and faith sector. That partnership, collaborative working type, that kind of partnership working is absolutely fundamental in the success of the ventures that we will do collaborate going forwards. Because, I think we say in Yorkshire, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. When we actually work together, we realise the benefits that each other's bring, and that actually starts to delayer us, because we're actually all working on the same project, working for the same communities. And I think more partnership working across all those platforms and all those organisations I mentioned, and focusing and zeroing in on those trusted leaders, trusted places. But first of all, we've got to find out and collate all the kind of streams of community engagement across London. Who's working with whom? And can we bring that together? Can we make sense of it? It could be that our colleagues in diabetes and cardiovascular and other projects and the vaccination team and all the ways that we kind of connect with our communities and cancer alliances, we're all trying to connect with the same underserved communities. Maybe if we could pull that together, that would make us stronger and better and fitter and more effective. I think the vaccination and screening groups that we've started in London, of which we've got for Somali, Bangladeshi, Pakistani, Black African Caribbean, Eastern European, etc., because it's not one size fits all. We're trying to work in that community-centered approach, and that for the future, providing it gets funding and is able to really do stuff and not just. We've got lots of interesting ideas by bringing communities, working with public health and cancer alliances. If those VSGs can be really successful with funding, I really believe that they have that ability to get the reach. And the main thing is, once you've got reach, you understand what the sweet spot is per community. That was a bit cheesy, but I call it the Marvin Gayean perspective. What's going on? How can we help?
Your voice delivers that in an incredibly powerful way.
I think sometimes people say they're a bit like Barry White on Saturdays, but but it's really important to understand what's really going on. How can we help? For many of our Eastern European communities, vaccinations and screenings is not a priority. For them, it's about getting a transition to e-visa. So we need to factor that in, that they have these particular issues and concerns, and then be there with the community, as Paul is in so many community events. When there are so many community events in Tower Hamlets and other areas in East London, the fact that they're there when other things are being discussed, like interfaith and immigration and whatever, that makes you feel part and parcel of those conversations. So I think it's that zeroing in, getting closer to the communities, working more London-wide, where we can share our resources, our ideas, and the stuff that the North East London Cancer Alliance are doing, that diverse approach, but being cognizant of those particular differences.
One thing to kind of finish on, and this is maybe, I don't know if this is the biggest challenge of them all, because there's a lot of challenges with reaching these communities that you can maybe sort of see a logical path. One of the things that joins us all, wherever we were born, whatever community we're in, is the ability to put our head in the sand, isn't it? And not want to talk about cancer. So how, very, very, very broadly, and we're doing it right now, but how do we get people able to talk about these difficult topics, wherever they come from? I know it's a massive question, but it feels like there's always going to be a cohort in every community and nationally who just don't want to talk about cancer.
But I think that cancer gives us, there is still that fighting hope.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fear. Fear is in every community. It expresses itself differently. But providing we can align ourselves with the progressive trusted voices, we can break through that fear and deliver the hope. How do we do that? We just have to partner with each other and get closer to those communities. They can help guide us, but you never forget the person that helps you.
Yeah.
I think there's a tremendous opportunity in cancer for us to really improve the uptake. I mean, for Bangladeshi women, it's really low compared to other ethnic groups.
How low?
26%.
26%.
Wow.
Yeah, that's really low, and it's kind of humbling. But there are other factors at play as well.
Yeah.
Deprivation is the highest in where the Bangladeshis live in London. So there, and as I mentioned, there's cultural and religious aspects as well. But those areas are actually opportunities for us to build the connections with East London Mosque and other temples and places of worship and women's organisations. But I just feel that there's a great opportunity that will be something of tomorrow. We can really make a step change for the next coming months and years to come if we keep on working together, keep on being culturally authentic, keep on bringing the communities right at the beginning of idea creation and not as an afterthought.
Yeah.
Right at the beginning, upstream, not downstream. And if we do that and we mobilize the trusted leaders, trusted places, trusted voices, like a mantra I keep on saying, we can really make a difference. Because I think when one person is saved from cancer, that family is so thankful.
Yeah.
I don't think my mum has stopped paying King's Mill charity it's like almost like a charity that has come from the heart, that connection with King's Mill. The fact that my dad is a retired GP but still doesn't transit down to London to look after his grandparents is indicative of how much he's thankful.
Yeah.
And my mum's thankful for King's Mill Hospital for saving her.
Yeah.
So the fact that, and we're so grateful, but at the same time humbled that so many don't make it, But that for that person that is saved, that creates such a cohesive sense of unity. We are all together in this green and sceptred isle. We all bring different stories, but do we not share the same experiences?
Wow.
Yeah, and I think you're right. So, and these are the people that need to be, we need to encourage them to open up about their journey, because it's hearing it from someone that's actually lived it, someone that you know, someone you trust, that is really going to make a difference. And I think the other thing is younger people, it's the younger generation are the key to really unlocking that, because they're much more open to talking.
Yeah.
And I think bringing them in and will really help as well.
And changing the way that you talk to those people as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, we're all. I'm in my 40s now. Your phone.
Reels.
We've talked in previous episodes about TikTok, about Reels, about different communication methods, and I think that's massively important for that generation as well. Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you so much, Riyad. I feel like we could talk about this all day. I love the rousing speech at the end. I'm definitely gonna go away thinking about that. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.